The saga of Song of the Executioner started off with reading the script and determining that there was a tremendous amount of material in a medieval European monastery, and our budgets were limited, but there was some flex in them. And in talking with Bill Panzer, he said, "Can you do this? And what will it take to make sure that this is going to be an authentic look for a medieval monastery?" And I did some square footage estimates and came up with a figure that Bill found acceptable. At that point, then I was stuck with that figure and had to make it work. So what I did was we designed a fairly sizable space with a colonnade down one side. And the colonnade had intervening areas that we would plug with wild walls, double-sided wild walls, and they would come in and out. We had other cubicles that could fit in.
That set was I was very surprised when they did it, because for them to build a set as elaborate as that, which was also able to be used in several different ways.
And this whole area had to become the entry to the abbey, several different hallways, the church, the dining room,
a visitor here, like you,
a scriptorium, a side chapel.
Women.
There was one other set. There was a bedroom, or a couple of bedrooms that were side by side. And we did this by very carefully organizing the changeovers with the first assistant director to make sure that as one thing was shot and we were approaching a lunch hour or a night changeover, that's when we would do it. So that there was a tremendous amount of pressure on the shooting crew to make their days so that we could make our changeovers happen. And that was pretty much how it sort of evolved. But the actual structure, we did our research, looked for a standard, reproducible, medieval hexagonal column that could be easily manufactured. The more you get involved in doing compound, complex curves and pendentives for support, we knew we couldn't afford it. But we could build massive amounts of walls and structure if they stayed in essentially two dimensions and right angles. And that's what we did. So we cheated our curves by using simple, cost-effective materials like large, soft foam that were laid on and carved. So we could get we still had right angles, but we also got our dimensional look with fairly cost-effective materials.
Oh, the monastery was an awesome set that they built. I was very surprised, actually, because it was a very large production, and which we actually kept and used later on in Homeland.
Scale plays a very strong part in all this. We tend to look, as creatures, we look horizontally.
Do not sing.
The wider you make something, the deeper you make something, it's a lot more forgiving. Something like Duncan's dojo is very deep and very wide. Rarely do we ever see the ceiling, but it has a tremendous volume to it, even though it's not a big space. The same thing happened in this monastery that we built, where we had a tremendous amount of width. We only went up so far, and then the supporting structure stopped at about 12 feet. So we never actually saw above that. Where the camera was going to shoot off it, we hung tapestries down, and it was our cheat, which allowed us to have a structure that was only built halfway and still look, as far as the mind was concerned, the eye was concerned, as if it was a full dimensional, high medieval structure.
Oh, I think having a storyline that went straight through several episodes was one of my favorite things about Highlander. I actually wanted to push for more two-part episodes and ones that had more story content like that. The only problem is that with a syndicated series, they were always shown out of sequence. So sometimes you would have the latter one being shown before the original storyline had been already told. But I thought it was a good idea. Song of the Executioner was a strong concept, and I think it set the grounds for the relationship between MacLeod and Callis for the rest of the season.
Why didn't you call? Oh, of course, no telephones. I want you to meet Anne Lindsay and meet a man who doesn't believe in the 20th century.
Oh, I believe in it. I just haven't quite arrived yet.
Oh, there's no hurry.
Well, Song of the Executioner represented what was really sort of a trilogy of shows that that focused on the relationship between MacLeod and Dr. Anne Lindsay. In Shadows, that relationship was kind of obviously at loggerheads, as MacLeod could not tell her what was happening in his life. And in Song of the Executioner, at the end of the piece, Anne Lindsay actually sees MacLeod die. He falls from an overhead balcony to avoid the sword of the immortal Callis, lands on the seats, breaks his neck, and she's a doctor. She examines him. She knows he's dead. The reason we took that turn is I think we had to find a way to get MacLeod away from Anne and over to Paris, to start with. The other thing was we needed to take that relationship to another level. So rather than just end it, which I think was on our minds as writers and producers on the show, we thought we would have MacLeod die, then have him reveal his immortality to her in the next episode, and once that had happened, draw her into that dangerous world, and then have her decide to leave it.
Well, I think Dr. Anne was it was a great concept. I just don't think it worked quite as well as the Tessa MacLeod relationship. The idea of setting MacLeod up with somebody that saved life where he was taking lives was a really interesting idea. It just somehow didn't quite hit its mark as a chemistry between the two characters. I think having MacLeod die in front of her caused him an obstacle, which was great to try and overcome, because he did feel something for her, and to put that obstacle in front of him then gave us much more willingness to see what happened between them later on. So to see him die in that way was kind of interesting, to see what was going to happen in the future, whether he was actually going to be brought back to her, or she was going to be brought back to him, or back into his life, was something that we were hoping that the fans would want to see. I think sometimes what happens, you can like a person off screen, you can have a great time with them, whatever, but sometimes it's what is in the soul and what is inside somebody, whether you have a connection with them or whether there is some sort of chemistry between you, whether it's good or bad, whether you have an animosity towards them or a love towards them, there is something that's happening between you. And that, I think, is something that is intangible in anybody that you talk to, and that you can't tell until you actually get it on screen to see whether that's actually working or not.